Welcome to the Holistic Path podcast, where we explore mindful living, conscious choices, and the deeper connection between body, mind, and spirit. I am your host, and I am so glad you are here. Let us take a gentle step forward together.
For many of us, maybe most, meat isn't just food, it feels like. Well, like strength.
Yeah.
A core part of vitality.
It definitely has that reputation, that deep-seated idea of meat being this pure life force.
Exactly. But what if that's maybe not the whole story? Our sources today suggest there's a lot more to it. A growing body of evidence pointing another way.
That's right. Nutritional science is always evolving, isn't it? And this is a great example of how long-held beliefs are really being looked at again.
Absolutely. So our mission today on the deep dive is to kind of unpack these arguments, the ones for maybe reducing or even cutting out meat entirely. The material you've shared is incredibly thorough. It looks at health, ethics, economics, even emotions.
It really does. It's about seeing the bigger picture, the ripple effects of our food choices, way beyond just, protein grams.
Right. So think of this deep dive as your shortcut, maybe, to getting properly informed on a really debated topic. We want to cut through some of the noise, share some surprising facts, maybe, and offer insights you can actually use.
Helping you grasp what's really important quickly.
Yeah. We'll explore different ways of eating, look at the research, examine how meat affects our bodies, sure, but also the planet, and, like you said, even our emotional state. Well, it's quite a scope. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So that life force idea, it's been around forever, practically. But the evidence we're seeing now really highlights the benefits, the health benefits of plant-based diets.
So the main point isn't about forcing everyone to change, but showing that limiting animal products or even stopping can have real significant advantages for your health.
Precisely. It's less about what you're giving up and more about what you might gain.
Okay. Now, before we get into the core arguments against too much meat, maybe we should quickly look at some of the meatless paths people take. Again, not trying to convert anyone here, especially the real meat enthusiasts.
No. It's just about understanding the options out there, what principles are behind them.
So one that our sources mentioned sounds quite intriguing, the raw food diet. They actually call it the only diet where you're truly eating living food. What's the deal with that?
Well, the idea is that cooking, the heat, destroys certain delicate enzymes and nutrients. So raw foodists believe eating uncooked foods gives you the maximum nutrient density, all those vital substances. It's meant to support detoxification, help regenerate organs.
Sounds intense.
It is. It's presented as potentially one of the healthiest ways to eat, but, it takes a lot of knowledge and planning. Definitely not for everyone.
Okay. Then there's the vegan diet. Most people have heard of this one.
Right. Consistently avoiding all animal products, milk, eggs, honey, the lot. Often driven by ethical reasons, but others too.
And it's definitely a growing trend, isn't it?
Absolutely. You see many well-known people thriving on a vegan diet, feeling energetic. But, and this is important, our sources stress that a healthy vegan diet needs careful planning. You have to make sure you're getting all the nutrients you need. It's about balance.
Right. It's not just about elimination. And then vegetarianism, probably the most common form people explore.
Yeah, most people are familiar with vegetarianism. You eat some animal products like dairy or eggs, but strictly no meat, poultry, or fish.
But there's a major pitfall here, according to our sources.
Yes, a really common one. Vegetarians often try to make up for the protein they're missing from meat by eating way too much dairy. Cheese, yogurt, milk.
Then why is that a problem?
Well, the sources explain that milk and dairy products can be quite problematic. They tend to be very acid-forming in the body, which throws off your pH balance. They can also contribute to mucus buildup, and milk proteins are actually common allergens.
So loading up on cheese pizzas and yogurts might not be the healthy vegetarian option people think it is.
Exactly. It can kind of undermine the benefits of cutting out meat if you overdo the dairy. You need to be mindful.
Okay, now let's shift gears. What about the other end of the spectrum? The die-hard meat eaters, as the sources put it. For them, a meal without meat just isn't proper food.
Yeah, that perspective is definitely out there. And often arguments about eating less meat they don't seem to land. They kind of bounce off.
And is there a connection to health issues?
Unfortunately, yes. A diet really heavy in meat often goes hand in hand with other unhealthy eating habits. This can lead to diet-related diseases showing up much earlier in life. Things like chronic digestive issues, painful arthritis, even serious heart problems like a heart attack.
That's quite sobering. And the sources note that sometimes people only really think about cutting back on animal products when they're actually facing one of these crises.
It's often a wake-up call, isn't it? But sometimes that call comes very late.
Right. So just to be clear, this deep dive isn't saying everyone must stop eating meat. Our sources do acknowledge that moderate, careful consumption can be fine, even beneficial for some people.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for your body, but doing it consciously.
So for those who do choose to eat meat, what are the guidelines for doing it in a healthier way? Our sources mention 3 essential factors.
Okay, first one is frequency. The recommendation is animal products only every other day, and importantly, in only one meal on those days.
Wow, okay. That alone is a big shift from how many people eat. What's the second factor?
Source quality. This is critical. Meat should come from animals raised with species-appropriate husbandry and feeding. Think animals grazing naturally, not confined and fed unnatural diets. The way the animal lived hugely impacts the quality of the meat.
That makes sense. And the third point was about avoiding something specific.
Yes. Avoid pork and pork products completely.
Completely. Why pork specifically?
It's highlighted as being extremely acid-forming, much more so than other meats. This contributes significantly to overacidification in the body, which is linked to things like rheumatism, gout, and general inflammatory processes.
Interesting. And the last piece was about combinations, how you eat the meat.
Right. Avoid combining animal products, meat, fish, dairy, eggs, with carb-heavy foods like grains, pasta, or potatoes in the same meal.
What is that?
That combination is apparently very taxing on the digestive system. It can really overwhelm it, especially if your digestion isn't super strong to begin with. It's like asking your body to process 2 very different things simultaneously.
Okay, so the message is, if you do eat meat, be mindful. Not too often, choose high quality, skip the pork, and don't mix it with heavy carbs. If you do that, you can enjoy it without major health worries.
That's the gist of it, yes. It's about making informed, conscious choices rather than just eating meat by default.
All right, stage set. Now let's really dive into those core arguments for reducing meat that our sources lay out. Argument 1 seems to connect ethics and health, focusing on industrial farming.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Industrial meat production often involves conditions for animals that are, well, frankly, cruel and undignified. We're talking transport, slaughter, but also just how they live.
Mass caging, right, and constant medication.
Exactly. Animals crammed together, often needing routine antibiotics just to survive the conditions. Plus, the use of genetically modified growth hormones is common, and crucially, residues of these things can end up in the meat.
And it's not just what they're injected with, but what they're fed, too.
Right. Instead of natural grazing or hay, they're often force-fed grain. And that grain is frequently GMO, possibly sprayed with herbicides, pesticides. Your body then has to process the downstream effects of all that, accumulated in the animal tissue.
Wow, okay. And the direct health risks for humans eating a lot of this kind of meat.
The sources link high meat consumption directly to increased cancer risk, also a higher risk of developing fatty liver disease.
Fatty liver seems to be getting more attention lately.
It is. It's now seen as a contributing factor to diabetes and other chronic liver problems. But here's something really interesting and hopeful from the sources. Replacing daily meat intake with plant-based proteins can actually reverse fatty liver.
That's powerful. So the connection is clear. Supporting this kind of meat production isn't just bad for animals, it directly impacts our own health.
It's an undeniable link.
Okay, let's shift to the second argument. Economic reasons. This connects to global food supply.
Yeah, this is about resources. The feed conversion ratio is pretty stark. It takes roughly 100 pounds of grain to produce just 1 pound of meat.
100 to 1. Just pause on that. That's incredibly inefficient.
It is. And that grain, used for animal feed, is then unavailable to feed people directly. This contributes to global hunger, countless people starving each year, while vast resources go into meat production.
And it's not just the grain, it's the land use too.
Absolutely. If we reduced meat consumption significantly, huge areas of arable land would be freed up. We could grow plant-based foods far more efficiently on that land. Plus, there's the environmental contamination issue, massive amounts of animal waste from factory farms polluting groundwater.
So cutting back on meat isn't just a personal health choice. It has these huge global economic and resource implications. It helps people, animals, the environment.
All interconnected. The sources suggest it could even give the climate a chance to recover.
Which leads us perfectly into argument 3.
Yeah.
The climatic reasons.
Right. This is becoming increasingly clear. Meat and cheese production have a really significant damaging impact on our climate.
How significant we're talking?
The sources are quite direct. They suggest a large-scale shift to plant-based diets could be a key part of the rescue from climate collapse.
Wow. Do they give specific numbers?
They do. Producing 1 kilogram of beef generates about 17 kilograms of greenhouse gases. Cheese is also high, around 15 kilograms of CO2 per kilo.
Okay, compare that to plants.
Fruits and vegetables, especially if they're regional, seasonal, organic, they typically generate less than 2 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram. The difference is massive.
So when we think about wanting, normal weather patterns, being able to ski locally in winter, keeping places like Southern Europe fertile and not turning into desert, our diet plays a direct role in that.
It absolutely does. It connects our personal choices to those large-scale environmental outcomes we all care about.
Okay, moving on. Argument 4 delves into nutritional physiology, specifically protein metabolism. This gets a bit technical, but it's fascinating.
It really is. So plant proteins provide all the essential amino acids our bodies need to build complete proteins. And importantly, metabolizing them requires relatively little energy from our bodies.
Okay, simple enough. But animal protein is often touted as being better or more easily used.
Ah, yes. And here's the crucial detail from our sources. That claim about animal protein being more easily utilized, it applies only to raw animal products.
Raw. So like steak tartare or sushi.
Exactly. The moment you cook it, grill it, fry it, roast it, the heat changes the protein structure. That apparent advantage over plant protein completely disappears.
So for the vast majority of meat we eat, which is cooked, that benefit isn't there.
Correct. And what's more, digesting these heated animal proteins actually requires more effort from your body. It has to produce extra metabolic enzymes.
And that puts a strain on the pancreas.
Precisely. Excessive intake of cooked animal protein can, over time, reduce the overall performance of the pancreas.
And the pancreas is vital, not just for digestion.
Right. It regulates blood sugar, obviously, so sustained overexertion can contribute to developing diabetes. But it also produces enzymes that help destroy cancer cells. If the pancreas is constantly overworked dealing with difficult-to-digest proteins and maybe too many carbs, its ability to perform that crucial cancer-fighting function could be compromised.
That's quite a connection.
Well,
Linking diet directly to the body's ability to fight cancer through pancreatic function.
it's a significant physiological link that many people probably aren't aware of.
Okay, argument 5, mineral deficiency. This sounds counterintuitive, maybe. Doesn't meat contain minerals?
It does contain some minerals, yes. But the issue is balance. Our sources state that a large part of the population is actually deficient in essential minerals.
And frequent meat consumption is a cause. How does that work?
Because metabolizing animal protein produces a lot of acidic byproducts. While the meat itself has some minerals that can help neutralize these acids, there simply aren't enough. You inevitably end up with an acid surplus.
Okay, so your body becomes too acidic.
It tries very hard not to. It needs to maintain a specific pH balance. So if the diet is high in acid-forming foods like meat and probably low in alkalizing foods like vegetables.
Which is often the case with meat-heavy diets.
Exactly. The body has to find minerals somewhere else to neutralize the excess acid, and it takes them from its own reserves.
From our bones, teeth.
Yes. It starts pulling calcium, magnesium, other minerals right out of your bones, teeth, and other tissues to buffer the acid load. Over time, this leads to demineralization,
Which can then show up as diseases like
osteoporosis, periodontosis, gum disease, arthrosis. Basically, degenerative conditions linked to the body slowly breaking down its own mineral structures. It's a hidden cost of that acid load.
wow. Okay, the final argument, argument 6, is maybe the most unusual. It's about an emotional burden and energy transfer.
Yes, this one moves beyond the purely physical or chemical. The concept presented is that organisms, humans and animals, store emotions as energy within their organs and tissues.
They use the analogy of organ donation.
Right, where sometimes recipients report experiencing memories or emotions connected to the donor. The sources suggest something similar happens with meat consumption.
So when you eat meat, you're absorbing some of the animal's stored emotional energy.
That's the idea. With every piece of meat, a part of those stored emotions, that energetic imprint, enters your system.
And given the conditions we discussed earlier, industrial farming, transport, slaughter, those emotions are unlikely to be positive ones.
That's the sobering point. The sources describe the likely emotional energy absorbed as things like aggression, panicked fear, sheer despair, stemming from the terrifying experiences many animals endure.
It certainly adds a completely different dimension to think about. Not just nutrients and calories, but this unseen energetic aspect of our food.
It definitely invites a deeper reflection on what it truly means to nourish ourselves.
Okay, so bringing this all together, It seems clear that while, yes, moderate conscious consumption of high-quality meat from well-raised animals might be okay for some healthy people,
Right. It's not an absolute ban for everyone being suggested.
but for anyone eating a lot of meat, especially conventionally produced meat, the arguments we've explored today for rethinking those habits are really, really compelling from multiple angles.
Absolutely. The principle of less is more seems particularly applicable to meat consumption. It really comes down to finding a balance that works for your health, yes, but also considers the wider impact.
It really does. Which, I guess, leads to a final thought for everyone listening. After diving into all of this, from how our cells metabolize protein to global food security, right down to these unseen emotional energies, what does truly nourishing yourself actually look like for you now?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe what's just one small change you might consider making? Something that honors not just your own health, but maybe that broader sense of well-being we've been talking about. Something to think about.
Thanks for walking this path with me today. If this episode resonated with you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected. Until next time, take care of yourself. And keep moving forward, one conscious choice at a time.